Today on CityCast Portland, we're talking about why you might have seen picket lines in front of Mike Bennett's Wonderwood Cafe, the Portland Public School District's new anti-drug bags they're handing out to students, and Mayor Ted Wheeler's proposal to take over management of every city bureau. Joining me for this Friday's News Roundup are CityCast Director of Newsletters, Bryan Vance, and our very own audio producer, Giulia Fiaoni. It's Friday, September 22nd. I'm Claudia Meza, and this is what Portland's talking about. Bryan, Giulia, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. It's good to be back.
Bryan, it's always nice to have you. You're like the fifth Beatle.
You know, I will wear that title with honor. I love that. That's awesome.
That's so true.
Well, before we get into the week's news, I like to ask a question just so you have an idea of who I'm talking to, what you're getting yourself into. And I wanted to base our first question from a voicemail we got from a listener. Dylan wrote in. He had a comment about a show we did this week called What We Know About Abandoned Buildings. We had the Willamette Week reporter Anthony Effinger on to discuss some of these vacant and empty office buildings in the downtown area and just other areas. So Dylan wrote, something that I heard from your guest just really bothered me. This idea of how great it would be to require people who are working from home to go back into the city because it will help downtown Portland. It's just like this idea that, because these people are employees and have no choice, we can force them to do something every day. All of these things basically force them to help keep a system in place that clearly doesn't work for us anymore instead of thinking of something new. That just kind of bothers me, and I don't like that take. Anyway, thank you. I love that part, by the way.
That's a great comment.
Yeah. I listen every time you put on a new episode and, have a nice one. And I just love when people write in something just like, I'm upset about something that was said. And then they're just like, have a good day. And I'm just like, Thank you, Dylan. I will have a nice one.
Thanks, Dylan.
But it got me thinking, I totally agree with Dylan's take, but it made me wonder, if we had to work downtown, I was curious, what building you would choose, to go to every day.
That's a great question.
Or what, where you would want to work from. And it could literally be any building, and it doesn't have to be an office building. It could just be this is where I'm working from downtown. So I don't know if you guys remember when we interviewed a bridge operator. And he mans the Hawthorne Bridge, and he was telling us how it goes all the way up. It's one of those bridges that lift. It doesn't open in the midway. It just sort of his whole little office setup just lifts all the way up.
Like Transformer style.
Yeah. And he was saying that it affords him the most magnificent view, and you could see everything. You could see the whole river. You could see mountains. You could just whatever. And I'm like, I want to work right next to him. That's where I want my office to be. It's downtownish,
What's the Wi-Fi reception like there? You know?
Well, from the taping, I don't think it was good.
Yeah, it didn't sound good.
I think it sucked for the podcast, but it would be awesome for me.
I'm going to be boring. I've never been inside any of the big downtown buildings. So I think it would be cool to go inside Big Pink and see, is it really is there anything to it? Or is it just a soulless office building in a weird shade downtown? It's not even the tallest one, so it's whatever. I think it's second or third tallest, but yeah, it'd just be cool to be in there finally, to feel like I arrived in some weird insider cult in Portland, that I get to commute to an office building. So
Wait, you've never been to the Portland City Grill on the 31st or 33rd floor of Big Pink?
No.
Oh,
I've
my
never
God.
been inside that building ever.
Neither have I.
It's a beautiful view. Bryan, you should do it. It's gorgeous.
I should do it. But yeah, I want to go to Big Pink and, be sad that I'm working in an office all day.
That sounds nice, Bryan. What about you, Giulia?
My first thought was actually Providence Park. So just recently, I was invited to a company picnic there from a dear friend of mine. And I actually got to go out in the middle of the field and kick a ball around.
Oh, wow.
And my childlike heart was so excited by that opportunity. And I just picture this ideal world where our office is set up in one of the club booths, kind of up top.
That would be so
And
cool.
I'd imagine the sound would be okay, at least if there wasn't a game going on. And on my breaks, I could go and just kick a ball around in the field. It'd be perfect.
That would be pretty cool.
Oh, Giulia, you won. That's
Right?
awesome. Yeah, that would be, I would love that. Well, Bryan, why don't you kick us off? What is the headline that caught your eye this week?
Okay, so Mike Bennett, I'm sure a lot of our listeners are familiar with this guy. His artwork of these like fantastical creatures urging Portlanders to drive slower, popped up all across the city during the pandemic. He's created a bunch of different like venues around the city in the past few years, and one of them that he did that opened last fall in St. John's is a like immersive art experience combined with a coffee shop. And it's called Wonderwood Springs. Well, last week news came out that the coffee shop part is not doing too well. It's struggling financially. And the holding company that Mike partnered with to run the coffee shop is actually transferring ownership to him and a business partner. So he's going to take over actual ownership and running of the coffee shop. What caught my attention was the backlash from the employees that emerged from this. Employees started picketing the coffee shop. There are now review bombs happening. So people who haven't even like been there reviewing it 1 star because they saw something on social media.
Oh no.
Yeah. So long story short, Mike Bennett's taking over. It's basically like someone bought a business, a struggling business with plans to kind of, right the ship, change a few things. They offered employees severance. They offered employees health insurance through the end of the month. And the previous owner, which is a holding company that owns a bunch of things, a bunch of different restaurants and bars and stuff in Portland, offered to help find everyone employment at other places. But that wasn't good enough for anyone. And it's just turned into this like really kind of cringy experience of like, if you don't get exactly what you want, then the other person is evil. The other person is bad. And, there were some mistakes made. Mike has even come out and made a statement admitting that like he told all the employees that like you'd have to reapply for your jobs. Probably not the best choice of words, but like it is a different business now.
From what I heard, he didn't buy the cafe. I think it was given to him.
It's a like transfer of ownership with no monetary exchange.
Which is kind of cool. Like I was like, oh, that's cool. I wish someone would give me a business. Yeah, I heard about this because it's literally right on the corner. Like if I go outside,
yeah, it's right near you.
Like it's right there. And I don't know. Have you guys been to that cafe?
I haven't.
I have.
Do you want me to give you the rundown?
Yeah, I'm curious what it's actually like in there.
Okay, so I went in. The first day was open just because, again, right in the corner. I was like, yeah, and I go in, and it just felt like where somebody would go play like a really long D&D game. That's the vibe. You know what I'm saying? And so I was like, well, this isn't my vibe. I have my own coffee shop. But I was like, I'm glad it's here. Moved on. But as the weeks rolled on, I've noticed people started to go in with little elf ears. And do you know what I mean? And I would look into
the vibe.
Yeah. And I looked into the windows, and like there was always some sort of tabletop game happening right in the front. And so I was like, oh, okay, this is who comes here. It's like a nice safe space for sweet nerds who want to play magic cards or whatever. Cool. So when I saw the baristas all picket, I thought that it was people that were going every day to play D&D, that they were mad that it closed. Like I didn't quite understand.
It's really funny.
I don't know why everyone's mad that they can't play D&D anymore for like however long it takes to like switch over. And I was like, man, these people are really. I was like, well, I guess if the campaign was like in the middle of something, and
they just shut you down. Yeah, that would be disruptive.
That's what I thought was happening. And then somebody was just like, no, sorry, that's a long story to say. I don't even know what's happening in the corner of
my question is like, was the coffee any good? Were the pastries any good?
Okay. Yeah. I feel like I'm going to kick a shop that's already being kicked, but no, I didn't like it. I didn't like the coffee. And unfortunately, the pastry that I had was something that they were getting pastries from Sparrow, but it tasted like a day old or 2 days old. And I was like, and Sparrow is like, I'm like, I can walk 5 minutes to Sparrow and get a fresh.
Yeah, it's right there.
Yeah, and get a fresh croissant and not buy like a more expensive old one.
Yeah.
And again, it was like the first couple days.
Totally. Restaurants take a little while to hit their groove, but there's a reason it was struggling. It wasn't doing well. The fact that the company gave it to Mike shows that like they're really invested in finding a way to keep this business going, even if the way they were running it wasn't sustainable and wasn't going to work. And just like the whole like, this is going to get me in trouble, but the sort of the crybaby reaction to what's happening is ridiculous, frankly. Like there are enough real issues in the labor market in Portland that you being notified with ample time that your struggling business is closing down, changing ownership, and with plans to reopen, that your pay is gonna happen through a set period of time, your health insurance is gonna happen through a set period of time. There are efforts being made to help find you other long-term employment, is just kind of ludicrous. And it just provides a ton of ammo for people who criticize Portland. And it's silly.
It is like a lot of like sweet, younger looking people with elf ears and colored hair, basically wishing capitalism didn't exist. So it does. I can totally see like people outside of Portland be like, get it together, you know? Yeah. But I wanted to ask Giulia. Giulia's 24. She's worked in retail, you know, she's been a barista. Because to me, it seems like they're just upset with the idea that things are changing. And like that the space that they helped create is going to be different.
I will say, just in reading these articles that have laid out the back and forth, it's very clear that at some point something was lost in translation. And the first mistake was just not being on the same page with communication. And being someone who worked as a barista for a while, there is like a mini family dynamic that comes from working in that type of environment with your coworkers. It's early hours, you're dealing with difficult customers. So you start to have each other's backs. And I can imagine a situation where if someone misspoke, immediately everybody's going to dogpile, because you have this like defensive strategy a lot of times because you need to. But that doesn't leave a lot of room to renegotiate or even just clarify what might have been just a mistake, which is unfortunate. But I do resonate and understand the energy behind it, because majority of the time people do not have your best intentions in mind when you are working that kind of job. So I do sympathize with them. But I would say I would hope that people can be a little bit more understanding of trying to figure things out in the moment, right? Like it's very clear that everyone is trying to find a way through. So there has to be a better process and just like clarifying those details and at least being open to hearing each other out, even if it's multiple iterations of the same conversation, because these things get messy very quickly. But I do get it, though. I've been there, and it's really hard.
Yeah. You know, there is a barista relief fund for that. There's a GoFundMe for the Wonderwood Springs baristas, and they've actually raised $3,804 from their $14,000 goal. So that's, it seems they have support, you know, I mean, obviously
they're definitely getting traction.
Yeah, yeah. Well, good luck to Mike Bennett. I really do enjoy having him in the neighborhood. I hope that he's able to figure that out. And good luck to those baristas. Because I think a big thing that they said is like, oh, it's going to be so hard to recreate, I think what Giulia just said.
Yeah, that vibe, that family.
But just as someone who is also, as they've claimed, neurospicy, I understand change is really hard, you guys. I totally get it.
Totally.
Change is hard. But hopefully they'll find a new situation where they feel that, you know, camaraderie again. I can't imagine they're not going to be able to find another job. Everyone's hiring.
There's so many openings right now. And like, it is still Portland. Like you're still going to find a place. There's going to be an opportunity out there for you to find a place where you can have that.
Well, Giulia, what is your headline of the week?
All right. So my article this week is from Natalie Pate from OPB. And she talks about that in partnership with Multnomah County, Portland Public Schools recently distributed more than 14,000 drug deactivating bags called doTERRA bags to high school students across the city. So these doTERRA bags, they're biodegradable, and there are these like small pouches almost like the size of a small book that have non-toxic crystals inside where you can dispose of things like expired medications and just illicit drugs generally. And that's anything from like Advil to weed to fentanyl. It's all deactivated once you throw it in. And it's easy to use. You open the bag, you put the drugs in, anything up to 45 pills, put some water in, seal it shut, and then you're free to toss it in the garbage. And this right now, it's important because fentanyl-related teen overdose deaths across the U.S. have nearly tripled from 2019 to 2021, with deaths among Oregon teens specifically increasing faster than anywhere across the country. So it's obviously a huge issue. But the hope is, at the very least, regardless of whether or not these bags are used, students are bringing them home to their families and opening up conversation with their guardians about drug abuse generally. But before I dive too much into it, I want to hear your initial thoughts on it. Bryan, Claudia, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
I was recently reading something, and I cannot remember where, but about like dogs overdosing on fentanyl because the way that people are getting rid of drugs, and when you don't have a way to get rid of something, you throw it on the ground or whatever. So I think this, like, if these work as well as they are, or as they claim to, like, I would love to see them everywhere. And honestly, not just for fentanyl. Like, look how hard it is to get rid of like old Tylenol. Like, you have to find a pharmacy that's willing to take it. Throwing it in the trash isn't the best thing to do. Flushing it down the toilet isn't a great thing to do. Like, so like, I would love to see these everywhere, but it is kind of funny to me that we still can't do things like fentanyl test strips, but we can do fentanyl destruction pouches.
Yeah, well, Bryan, I agree, but I feel like you're speaking about it through an adult lens. These are children who are getting these bags.
True. These are kids.
These are kids. And the first thing I thought, I was like, man, if I got that bag, and knowing how I was as a child, I'm like, my mom would have been so pissed when she got home, because like every pill would have been in that bag, just so I could be like, wee,
to test it out.
Like, it's here and now it's gone. And she, you know what I mean? And Tylenol's expensive. Like, she would have just been like, girl, I'm so mad at you right now.
Like one of those Costco size, like 400 pill bottles.
Just dump it all. It'll overflow though, because you said 45 pills. So.
Yeah.
You have to take it slow.
And like maybe trying to rip them open too, and I'm curious, like, what the heck are these crystals? Are they like, do they look like something from a crystal shop? Do they look like salt? Like, what the heck are they? And like, what else can I put in there? And what happens if I pour Coke in there? Does it blow up?
Oh, that's what I'm saying.
Exactly.
Oh my God, that's so cool.
Coca-Cola, not cocaine. Coca-Cola.
Put some Mentos in there. Put some Coke. Let's see. Oh, let's see what happens.
Blast off, baby.
That's right. Blast off, baby. Sorry, that's the newsletter quote.
That is right there.
No context. Giulia says, "Blast off, baby," about the Terra bags. Whatever meticulous point you're going to say, that's all I'm going to remember.
I can live with that.
Okay. Well, what do you think, Giulia? I mean, I'm like, out of all of us.
Speaking for the kids.
Yeah.
So I'm 24 years old, and I was still in high school less than a decade ago. So it's fresh enough in my head to picture myself in these kids' shoes. And I can't help but remember when I was back in school, these say no to drugs initiatives on campus that were always cheesy and not ever helpful. So they would all like call us into the auditorium for an assembly, and there would be someone giving this like over enthusiastic and out of touch speech about how you shouldn't be using drugs. And it would be so similar to the types of conversations that we'd be having in sex ed class about abstinence. Right. And it was never anything that had like a tangible impact. We'd leave with like these bracelets that were engraved with like something that along the lines of like weed is a gateway drug. And then you'd go home and be like, well, I'm not sure what I learned, but here I am with this bracelet. And this is all to say, I'm grateful that people are starting to take a different approach. It seems like there is an intention to be more thoughtful about it. But I do question how useful these doTERRA bags really are when being handed to a high school student. Like you guys said, I imagine it being turned into a meme or some kid doing something ridiculous with a doTERRA bag to go viral on TikTok before it's actually being used for what it's intended to. And I fear that the kid that needs it the most, that is out seeking these illicit drugs and spending their money on it, the last thing on earth they're going to do is actually put the drugs in the bag.
Destroy it. Waste all that time and money and effort. Yeah.
I would imagine that in this case, it would be so much more useful to be handing out fentanyl test strips to these kids, because they're going to be using the drugs regardless. They might as well know if there's fentanyl in it so that they are not accidentally overdosing. So I looked into this.
Right.
And here's the thing. According to an article by Kristen McCurdy from Oregon Business, passing out fentanyl strips was illegal because it was considered drug paraphernalia. But then back in June, Oregon lawmakers passed House Bill 2395 that changed the language, so that's no longer the case anymore.
Okay.
So there is an opportunity to at least consider this. I can't imagine rushing into it, but...
No. I still think you need a thoughtful
approach.
Plan, you know.
Well, here's the deal. They didn't pay for these deterra bags. I think we all know that. These were given to PPS by the county. The county was like, hey, we have a bunch of these. Do you guys want them? And they're just like, yeah, you know what we'll do? We'll put a QR code on it, and it'll lead to tips for parents on how to have these like anti-drug talks. And this is basically what they were thinking is like, this is a conversation starter because they're going to go home. The parents going to be like, what the heck is this? And then now you have to talk to your child who's just like, you know, being like, what's drugs, you know, or whatever. And then now you have to have this talk. I feel like if that was the entire point of that, they succeeded. Everyone's going to be talking about it. But like, we're talking about it. But if it's like, hey, to deter like actual children from doing drugs, obviously no. But I don't know if that was the point. I think it's just like one of many things that they're trying to do to get kids and parents on the same page.
Yeah, and I think my point is that this is great, but it's not time to go patting ourselves on the back saying this is enough. It's very far from that. And
this is like a step. You know?
This is a step. This is a baby step. And I hope in an ideal world that this opens up a door to head in the direction of actually giving out resources that will be directly helpful for those kids that are most at risk.
Now, I just really want one of these Datura bags, Brian, because I really do want...
I want to put a Mentos and some Coca-Cola in
and I just want to know what happens.
If someone can give us some bags, I will conduct the science experiment in my yard.
We have a lot of drugs that we want to get rid of.
Yeah, I've got so many.
Well, let's take a quick break here, and when we come back, more headlines of the week. Rose City Comic Con, Portland's premier comic convention, is quickly approaching. From September 22nd through the 24th, you can catch some of your favorite celebrities and comic creators at the Oregon Convention Center. Everyone from Guardians of the Galaxy stars Zoe Saldana and Karen Gillan to Doctor Who stars Arthur Darvill and Alex Kingston. You can also meet the full cast of Critical Role, including Matt Mercer, not to mention Ralph Macchio and Rebecca Romaine, because why the not? Comic creator guests include Greg Rucka, Kelly Sue DeConnick, Adam Hughes, Phil Jimenez, Brian Stelfreeze, and many, many more. There will also be video games galore along with tabletop and RPG gaming all weekend long. And that's in addition to family-friendly events like Rose City Junior, Destination Cosplay, and a book fair in partnership with the Powell City of Books. You don't want to miss out on this one. You can check it out for yourself and get your badges over at rosecitycomiccon.com. That's rosecitycomiccon.com. All right, guys. Well, my headline this week has to do with the city. I feel like we haven't... Could you imagine there being one Friday where we don't talk about the city?
No.
Like, I'd think that we like entered some sort of like weird alternative reality in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like, it'd be strange.
Well, you know, a few things happened this week and late last week. One, Mayor Ted Wheeler was like, hey, I'm not running for mayor again. Which news, you know. But then I think just like on Wednesday, Police Chief Chuck Lavelle said he was stepping down from his position. He's not retiring. He's not quitting. He's just doesn't want to be police chief anymore. Which, I mean, who could blame him? So they're getting a retired police officer, Bob Day, to serve as the Bureau's interim head until a new chief is selected in 2025. And I found that also just like, wow, nobody wants to be running the city.
2025?
No.
Wow.
To have an interim police chief. Okay, but so the story I wanted to get into is something that Shane Dixon Kavanaugh reported for the Oregonian. It has a little bit to do with this because where we are right now, you guys, within the city, is we're in a period of transition. So we voted for a new city charter a lot of change is going to happen. And I feel like we're seeing people who are in power right now just being like, how am I going to help to transition? Am I going to get out of the way? Or just like, you know what? I don't want to be like leading this horse when we get here. And so I feel like there might be a lot of strategic stepping down. Because I know that would be for me. I'd be like,
the first of many.
Yeah. So, but here's something that Mayor Ted Wheeler actually proposed to help with this transition. And again, I think this was a closed meeting, and I believe that these reporters found this out through other means. But in a meeting, it was said that Mayor Ted Wheeler proposed that perhaps he should take over all the bureaus to ensure a smooth transition into the new charter. And again, if you guys have no clue what I'm talking about, just know that this new charter is changing everything from how we vote for our city leaders to like how the city bureaus are managed, even to how many on the city council we have, So supposedly the mayor's chief of staff, Bobby Lee, raised this prospect of this major mayoral power play. And the thought was that all of the bureaus not currently under his control would transfer over to his control as soon as the 1st of November. It's all mayor. It's all mayor run. And the reasoning was that Mayor Wheeler wanted to consolidate power over the next year's budget as a test run of the new governing system set to begin in January 2025. So that's a long test run. It's also just like, I don't know. It feels odd. You're going to need that much time to figure all of that out. But the move would also jumpstart the interim city administrator, which is part of the new city charter. We're now going to have a city administrator that's going to oversee the day-to-day operations. So Wheeler's like, not only am I going to do this, but I'm going to bring this guy in who he made it known he wanted Portland Chief Administrative Officer Michael Jordan.
Wow. No, don't we have a Mike Myers too?
We have a Mike Myers and a Michael Jordan.
Names.
I know.
So silly.
And Police Chief Barack Obama, no relation. So the Portland Chief Administrative Officer, Michael Jordan, already directly reports to the mayor. So basically the mayor's like, let me take over all the bureaus. I'm going to put my guy in charge of the day-to-day. So of course, the city council is the mayor and let's say 4 commissioners, right? And those 4 commissioners oversee the bureaus. So the rest of the commissioners are just like, I'm sorry, the fuck? Like,
you want to do what now?
What are we supposed to be doing? Like, what does this mean for us, Ted? Because basically it just means that they would get benched. Like, what are they supposed to be doing? So, he's like, I can imagine this being a little bit thorny. Like, that is a direct quote, because everybody has to let go of something and everybody is going to take on new responsibilities. But it's like, but like nobody knows what those responsibilities would be then. Like,
that's the difference between like what Wheeler's proposing now and what will happen when the charter reform is. Like, those responsibilities for the city council in the new government are outlined. Like, they're a legislative body. They propose legislation. They vote on legislation. Right now, they are a weird like administrative / legislative body. And you'd be taking away half that job and not. Because like, is Wheeler also giving up his ability to propose legislation and veto legislation? And
here's the deal. As a charter is now, Wheeler can't create an interim city administrator position without a city council majority. So
good luck, buddy.
so he could theoretically take the bureaus away and give it to this administrator, but then at the same time it's like, but you can't create this position without the city council. So how do you do that? But so I'm just curious, like, what do you guys think of this?
Yeah, I feel like Wheeler has a tendency to just try to throw everything at the wall and see what sticks and tends to overcorrect. And this feels like an example of that. It's almost like he just wakes up one morning and he's like, I got to do this right now. And
there's a light bulb.
Slow down. But another thing is, though, I feel like there's a nice middle ground between what the commissioners are saying and what Wheeler's saying, where we really should start like ramping up to this. Maybe not on November 1st, but I guess it's helpful to at least be talking about it.
Yeah, a stepped approach is probably something that makes sense. Is like you slowly start taking over some of the smaller bureaus and consolidating them.
Mm-hmm.
But no, like Ted Wheeler is like very much that person who like dreams out loud, who's like, I'm going to be the president of the world, and just tells everyone that, but is like, yeah, but did you think about how that's actually going to work or how that sounds? Like that's Ted. Like, and I do have to say, I kind of like this new, like, I don't give a fuck version of Ted, the one who's like, I'm not running, I'm not accountable to anyone right now, I'm just going to do what I want. Like, it's kind of cool to see that, but he's out of his mind if he thinks he's going to get Mingus Maps, who wants to be mayor, to agree to this, who's looking to score points, before he runs, Carmen Rubio, who's probably also trying to become the next mayor, Dan Ryan, who very much might try to become the next mayor, Renee Gonzalez, who very much might try to become like, it's the wrong crowd, buddy. Like, it's the wrong, like, read the room. They're not going to agree to that. But yeah, there's probably some middle ground here that we just haven't seen yet that they could do.
And all the commissioners were like, hey, if you want to start this in the latter half of 2024, let's go. Not in 6 weeks. Like,
yeah, that's not enough time. And the whole reason there's a timeline for the charter transition is because there's so many things that have to happen.
Yeah.
A bunch of new positions, changes to how bureaus operate, to how literally changes to City Hall, like the actual building, itself, like the rooms and whatnot in it. And so it's like 6 weeks is just not realistic. But I do hope that they do something like this, because they're going to have to do it anyway. And it's better to not just like expect that we flip a switch and everything works. It's better to like work our way towards that. Like, the writing is on the wall. So I'm glad that like he's seeing that and he's pushing people towards it. But there is no way in hell this is going to happen by November 1st.
Yeah. You know what I thought immediately when I read this? I was like, oh, dude is trying to take care of his legacy.
Yeah, he's trying to clean it up and be like, look, I got
I'm
shit
the
done.
One.
It was I
cut through all the stalemates, and I like actually push things forward.
You're welcome, Portland.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, you're still part of the system that nobody wants.
He still promised to end homelessness in 2018. Like,
oh my goodness.
2016, something like that, like years ago. Like, that's what I mean, though. He just dreams out loud. Like, he says, I'm gonna fix the global economy. Like Ted Wheeler, probably said that at some point at a dinner party. So,
oh man, but no, I agree with you, Brian. I'm actually really excited for this untethered Ted Wheeler.
I think the drama at City Hall is gonna get so spicy.
I can't wait, you guys.
It's going to be like a real life version of.
This is Game of Thrones.
I don't know, Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Like,
This is straight up Game of Thrones.
It's nuts. It's going to be fun.
There is this amazing TikTok creator who does these really dramatic kind of like old English reenactments of like a Miami girl trip.
Oh my gosh.
It's hilarious. And I just wish that we could do that for like every story. Because also we have the names like, and then Mingus Maps.
Right. We have such great names.
We have such great names, and I don't know. I'm not promising that I might get together a play that brings, but I really would love, if there's any writers out there, and if you know the TikTok creator I'm talking about, like, how cool would it be if we just did a complete reenactment of the whole transition into the new charter, as old-timey Game of Thrones, just tacticians, Yeah,
I'd watch that.
What would it be called? It'd be called, I don't know. All I could think of is like Parks and Rec. I'm like, Coneshire. Like, no, that is the game, a fake game in Parks and Rec.
Okay, I got an idea. Chasing the Charter.
Chasing the Charter?
Mm-hmm.
We gotta have a dragon in there. Dragon, the charter.
A dragon would help.
A dragon charter. Dragons.
I'm terrible at naming things. I'm like that guy who's like, you see that rock over there? It's Big Rock. Like, that's me. So don't ask me for help here.
All right. If anyone has any idea on what we're going to name this radio play, please let us know. All we have right now is Coneshire and Dragons and Charter. Both terrible. Oh, man. Well, guys, thanks so much for hanging out and going through the news this week. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me this morning.
Thanks for having us and putting up with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Real quick before we end the show, we are getting closer to the Halloween season and have a question for all of our listeners. Do you have any Portland ghost stories you'd want to share with us? We're putting together an eerie Halloween episode and would love to read out loud some of your scariest Portland hauntings or paranormal experiences. Send them over to portland@citycast.fm or leave us a voicemail at 503-208-5448. That's all for today here on CityCast Portland. Thanks so much for listening. Our lead producer is John Natariani. Our audio producers this week were Giulia Fiaoni and Noah Snyderman. Our newsletter editor is Rachel Monahan, and our host is me, Claudia Meza. Original music by Jenny Conley and Stephen Drizos. Additional music by Epidemic Sound and All the Kimonos. We'll be back Monday morning with more from around the city. Until then, see you at Slim's.